Okay, YouTube, Google, and company, and my big nose up in front of the camera are telling me that this Break the Cage Now hangout is live. I'm going to adjust my, well, you don't need to see the bright, shiny spot on top of my head too much. It'll like glare. So besides that, little crystal's glaring in the picture, which is good. We're starting today, Break the Cage Now. This is our 5-part series on fear, uncertainty, and procrastination, the albatross of small business. I picked this, I love the acronym F.U.P, because it sounds, like a mess or of something wrong. And, the first episode was how the F.U.P did we get here? And we talked about all of the things in our contemporary trends in modern society and business that are contributing to these three things. And there's lots of ways to divide up the problems that we have. I picked fear, uncertainty, and procrastination because it made a cool acronym and because I thought it accurately described a collection of the real problems. Today is our 4th of the 5. My guest today, as on the others, is Kellan Dietzel, who's a mentor for high-profile clients in business and has some amazing business acceleration stuff. And so I'm glad that he's joined me for this 5-part series as my co-host. Kellan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kellan, and welcome to all of you that are joining us live today.
So today we're on part 4, which is procrastination. And as with fear and uncertainty, we divided the thing into 3 parts. Part 1 is, what are the symptoms that you have procrastination in your work? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, what are the consequences, either for you or for your clients? And of course, if they're for your clients, then it indirectly affects you. And number 3, what are you going to do about it? And we're going to deal with procrastination in those 3 sections, and that'll be the hangout today. And then next week, the final is going to be a wrap together of strategies and things that you can do to overcome this albatross. And I used albatross because thinking of, the albatross around your neck and the old story of, I forgot who it is, Moby Dick or somebody, that had an albatross that was the bad guy. So we will talk about that today. Procrastination, that is a evil word that's used a lot. It is epidemic in proportion, both in personal life and in business. So Kellan, as usual, our interaction is unscripted, which is how I like it. So I'm just going to ask you about procrastination. When I say that, procrastination, mostly with respect to business, but also with respect to other areas in your life, what comes to mind?
I think what comes to mind, Kellan, is that most people would probably say it's probably one of their 3 greatest hang-ups in life in terms of going where they want to go, journeying where they want to journey, getting to a destination that they really want to get a destination to, or even for that matter, getting clear on what it is that they really want to go after. And as I've dealt in the area of procrastination myself, and certainly with clients just like you have, I've tried to analyze procrastination in a way that makes sense to me. And it seems to have made sense to many of the clients that I work with. And I think that, again, we talked last week about cause and effect, right? And how sometimes we can take a look at what we think is a cause, and it could be the effect, or an effect could really be a cause. And I kind of take a viewpoint that procrastination is an effect, and it's an effect of something else. And I look at it as sort of a chain of events that our minds go through that lead us to procrastination. And I certainly have seen it in myself as I've analyzed myself, and I analyze other people like you do too, and you're exceptional at doing that, Kellan. And I really believe that procrastination is rooted in overthinking. And I think it's, as we've mentioned on previous trainings here in our What the F.U.P series, but I really believe that overthinking is what starts it. Just a lack of this, as we talked about last week, a little bit of a nebulous, or a huge nebulous understanding of where we're supposed to be. And if we don't even know where we are, how do we know where we're going to be going if we can't get clear on where we are? So to get clear on where we are right now around procrastination, I really think it starts with overthinking, and especially in today's age, as we mentioned, with so much information, the negative effects of social media, like we've kind of briefly discussed. I believe that procrastination starts with overthinking, and overthinking, then, if we look at it sort of in a linear sequence, what happens is, from my viewpoint anyways, that overthinking leads to indecision, and all of a sudden when we become indecisive, we're not really sure what we should be doing because there's all this information and data and people we're listening to, etc. And we're not even clear on who we are maybe, or where we want to go, and our focus and how we're going to get there, etc. And so indecision then leads to, we want to take action, but we're not really sure, so then we hesitate. And hesitation, I think, is the quintessential, the analogy that I use is, sitting kind of where you're straddling a fence. You're not sure if you want to take that leap into the new territory, if you want to go back to the old territory where you were. I kind of think of that many times when I was on my grandfather's farm, and fields were segregated by fences, and I would climb up on a tall fence and swing my leg over, and it was kind of that swinging the other leg over, kind of for a moment there, you're kind of not on anything, and if you're a little bit scared of heights, you'll know exactly what I mean. But so that's hesitation. And hesitation, I really believe, then leads to procrastination. And the best definition I know of procrastination, and I can't think of the author who gave this definition, but it's not that you're not going to do something, but you're going to do something tomorrow. So that is how I look at procrastination, and that's how I see procrastination working in a lot of my clients' lives, and certainly it's always there in my own life that I need to be aware of.
So let's think about procrastination in your business. I'm going to do something, but I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to do something, I'm going to use some metaphors for tomorrow. I'm going to do something after I know a little more. I'm going to do something after I just have a little bit more certainty about this. I'm going to do something after I just feel a little better. I'm kind of like almost there, and I need to, whatever. So I have a person that I'm working with right now that's trying to decide whether or not to they want to invest in themselves. There isn't an issue with, my coaching or anything else, but they're just not, and the confidence is in themselves, and where their overthinking is coming into play is their willingness to take responsibility. Mm-hmm. And so they're thinking about whether or not they're willing to do that. So the first question we have is the symptoms of procrastination. And if we're going to use overthinking as a genesis, let's do that, because there's lots of things that could lead to procrastination. We talked about fear another week. Sometimes people are afraid, and they may or may not be thinking about that fear, but that could be part of it. So let's just talk about overthinking. I'm hearing an echo. I'm not sure if it's...
I'm not hearing an echo, Kellan, just so you know.
Okay, good. I'll just go forward then.
Yeah.
What is give me some symptoms of a business that is suffering from procrastination.
Some symptoms. Let me use an analogy. In one of my very first Spartan races, the obstacle I was dreading the most was, and those of you that don't know what a Spartan race is, they're termed kind of the genre of racing is called mud racing, and it involves running up and down ski hills or mountains, through mud, crawling through mud under barbed wire, climbing up obstacles that may be 30, 40 feet high and getting down. And I remember my very first rope barrier. It was a rope fence between two trees, about 30 feet high. And I saw it coming. It was actually the second obstacle, third obstacle. I forgot. No, there was another two before it. It's the third obstacle, and I saw it from about 500 meters away. We were just coming down a hill, and I could see it ahead of me. And as I was getting near it, I could just feel myself starting to overthink. And I grabbed the rope and I climbed up, and I could just feel myself moving into the area of indecision. What am I going to do? Kind of when I get to the top. And I remember getting to the top, and I'm right in the middle of the rope, which is the place that you don't want to be. You want to be closest to the trees because there's little movement. And I'm in the middle with everybody else going up and down it, and I'm in the area of greatest turbulence. And I remember getting up, and I was trying to swing my first leg over. And as I mentioned, that analogy of being on the fence, when you're sitting at the very top and the rope's doing this, you're in that state of hesitation. Do I go forward, or do I go backwards? And I see, just so you know, what happened there, I actually went backwards and went all the way to the ground. I was really upset with myself that people were going up, and I let my fear kill me. So what I did is I made a strategic move, and I moved to the side where the trees, where the left tree was, went up the very edge where there was not as much torque on the rope, and got over it, and was just elated, and it gave me a new sense of energy. So what I see businesses doing today, Kellan, to use that analogy, is they are not strategic enough. They are trying to implement without being clear that one of the principles of success in today's market, something that we've discussed on our previous training, and that's strategy on the fly. And they understand that they have to strategize on the fly, but without the kind of proper mentorship, they end up going, they try to move into a new market, or they try to advance what they're doing, but they're doing it in the area that requires the most energy, most fear, and business is all about conquering your fears, right? We all got to conquer new walls that are before us, but you want to make sure that the wall that you choose, or the path that you choose with your business, is the path of least resistance. And so I see the fundamental mistake that I see so many businesses making, and we've talked about this too, I believe, in the past, just a little bit about traditional business funnels versus accelerated business funnels that allow clients to just, command the kind of presence, the kind of influence, allows your company to grow in the way that you want to with the least amount of resistance. So choosing the right path, being with the right mentor, we're getting already into some actionable steps, but some of the consequences that I just mentioned is just not choosing the path of least resistance. There is going to be a path of resistance, but choose the path of least resistance. And most people don't know, most clients I see don't know how to choose the path of least resistance, because they're taking in so much advice, and that advice is not maybe articulated specifically to the company's really specific desires of where they want to go. So I hope that makes sense.
So let me just summarize that. The rope analogy is really good. So symptoms. So I want you to listen and think about your business. If you are running toward a new opportunity and you are getting churning and fear, you don't know how to do it. You know you want to or have to climb over this rope that's in front of you. And rather than strategically getting cogent and directed advice to go to the left side and climb up by the tree, you're just flying up, which would be strategy on the fly. In other words, creating for yourself, and this is important, creating for yourself the opportunity to get strategic, cogent, powerful advice to get to the left tree, climb up there and go down because you want to get on the other side because of the opportunity that is in front of that. You're just flying up the middle, getting flung all over the place by the turbulence in your niche and your market and advice and all the crap that's flying around, getting to the top and being unable to get over the top in the middle because of the turbulence, and then you either lose a lot of time, first mover advantage, and other kinds of things. So in terms of answering this question, the symptoms of procrastination are either not climbing the rope at all, it is climbing in the wrong place, meaning starting with the opportunity in a bad way, not creating for yourself the opportunity to get good, directed advice so that you can do it in the most powerful way. So those are some really clear and powerful symptoms that procrastination or overthinking is affecting your business. You're missing an opportunity, or you're trying to do it and you're feeling just completely blown away by the turbulence, resistance, and activity in the market. The second part of today's thing is, okay, what are the consequences? What are the consequences? So, for example, we'll just continue with this analogy. The consequences of Glenn being in the middle of the rope was he lost a bunch of time. He flipped out at the top, had to climb down it in embarrassment, shame, frustration at himself, had to deal with that whole emotional dance at the same time as making a strategic decision to go to one side or the other and start over again. good for not giving up, lots of missed first mover advantage, certainly not his best time on the rope obstacle, which I'm sure the next time he did that in the next Spartan race, it was way different. So we learn from that, and I want to use that analogy. It's a good one. Let's just stick with it and go with the question, what are the consequences? Revenue, opportunity, confidence, movement, growth that hurt you because you have done this: lack of preparation, overthinking, procrastination, bad advice, too much advice, et cetera, et cetera. Glenn, what do you see as the consequences of those actions?
Well, and if we use that analogy, then, you know, if I put myself in there, just like a company would be thrown into in some kind of innovative move, internally or externally within a market, within an individual innovating or having to transform themselves, there's certainly, I felt a lot of angst. Most definitely. I certainly felt lack of fulfillment. There's nothing worse than seeing yourself retreat, even though I knew that that was probably going to be an obstacle, because I'd done a lot of research on the different types of obstacles. And I see this today, you know, with a lot of business owners, and I see this with myself. You know, we all know there's obstacles in business, but the problem is we experience those, or we think about those obstacles almost like we're doing a university course or a university degree. You know, it's very cognitive. Yes, we know that, you know, there are these obstacles in business, and every business has to blow through obstacles. However, until we really experience them, sometimes we just think, like, why didn't I realize that going up the middle, or choosing, why didn't I pick a better path ahead of time and had a better plan of action for this obstacle? And that's where mentoring comes in. So some of the other feelings that I had that certainly I think I see businesses having is kind of almost a passive aggressiveness. You see people going above you, and you almost want to, like, grab them and say, like stay with me. You know, I see you moving, but I can't do it. I also see clients, and I see companies and business owners becoming put themselves in a denial state, and I see that a lot with individuals, and even some leaders to a certain extent. You know, they can we can begin to hide. We can be in a self-denial that you know, that this obstacle really exists and I got to get over it, and just kind of deny it and hide ourselves from that. So the internal versus external anger. Definitely that is a consequence that I see. As I mentioned, there could be a passive aggressive. There can also be an active aggression. And as soon as you get into that phase of anger, whether it's internal, external, whether it's passive or active aggression, no longer are you thinking strategically. You're thinking irrational, because anger is in the area of irrationality, and we start making really, really, really bad decisions. So bad decisions are a killer in today's marketplace, and just kind of coming full circle that bad decisions are ultimately rooted in kind of in an emotional state. As we mentioned last week, if you want to make a fast change in your life, change your emotional state, and watch how things can transform themselves in your life and in your business.
So good. Let's finish up this second part. The second part is about consequences. So emotional turmoil. And you know what? A business can have emotional turmoil. I was in a very high intensity, high pressure startup situation in California when they created the deregulated electricity law, and they were going to open the electricity grid. And this was in the late 90s. And they had this about 15 years ago, 16, 17 years ago. And there was a new company, and I was one of three musketeers hired to sort of build this law. And there was an emotional turmoil that was palpable, emotional anger in the company, emotional turmoil. And it wasn't necessarily between people, but there was the turmoil of the legislative deadline, of a pile of stakeholders, of lots of indecision. And because it was new territory, this kind of market had never been built in the world. So it wasn't that there was an example of go do it like that. It wasn't a like that. And this was one of the places where I understood and learned many of the skills that I have now. And I ended up sort of being a de facto leader because I was able to do some of the things that Glenn talks about, strategy on the fly, create, direct path and answers and move. And so the consequences that we see of this overthinking that Glenn articulated well is you get anger, you get emotional turmoil, you get lost time, you get lost opportunity, you lose a lot of money as a business. And you lose momentum internally. And loss of momentum can be really damaging because you then have to overcome the inertia. Again, after you've screeched to a halt at the top of the rope, you have to go all the way down and then climb up again. And that is a bunch of inertia to overcome to reestablish your momentum. So a lot of negative consequences associated with procrastination, overthinking, and its relevant effects. So the third question here is, what can you do right now? So we've talked about what procrastination is. We've talked about what it does. Now let's talk about what you can do about it. So maybe the analogy works with the rope. Maybe there are some other pieces we should bring in. But let's talk about what people can do today in their business that find themselves suffering from those things you've just described.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of things that we can all do, and some of my suggestions, I certainly don't do them perfectly, but the first rule that I always, I've learned from experiences and making a lot of very expensive mistakes is that mentorship is fundamental. Unless you have somebody that can tell you ahead of time what you're going to go through, some of the experiences that you're going to feel, understanding that business and life are very congruent and synonymous. So as disappointing and as challenging as life is, and I know that Kellan's had a ton of challenges over his life, like you have, and certainly like I have over especially the last several months. There are, that is, if that's happening in our life, that's going to happen in business. And it's one of the first things that I learned, Kellan, that business is. Not that business should be. Business is. So when you face an obstacle and you're in a moment, you've got to have a plan of action. And sometimes retreating just for a brief moment, going to a place of power, or we talked about that last week, knowing where some of your, where you feel strong emotionally, go there. There's nothing wrong with doing that to reset yourself. In basketball, if somebody misses a foul shot, they're always mentored to step away from the foul line and then reset yourself. Yes, there's maybe a little bit of lost time, maybe it may be a little wasted energy, if you will, but it really allows us to reset ourselves. And if we use the analogy that I mentioned, I went into an obstacle that I knew about, but I didn't fully create a plan of execution until I was in the moment, and I had to retreat. Instead of thinking about it ahead of time and realizing there was going to be a lot of torque on that rope, and the worst place you could go up is in the middle, if I had just, instead of thinking about my fear, which was heights, and that's all I was worried about the obstacle because of the height component, as opposed to just thinking about, okay, what's the best way of getting over this rope? I was just concerned that I just need to get over it. Getting mentorship is crucial that tell you ahead of time which side to go on. Certainly, what benefited me in that obstacle in my very first Spartan race was the mentorship of others. I remember going over the rope, and I was at that middle point, at the area of hesitation, 1 foot on one side, 1 foot on the other, and I could still feel the torque, even though I was by the tree. And I remember 2 people going up on my side, and they were both yelling at me, "You can do it! You can do it!" Because they saw that I was paralyzed. So that's so important, is being with people that are going in the direction that you're going, that understand the obstacles that you're going to be going through, and encouraging you to blow through them. one of the things that I recommend too, Kellan, is doing the things that make you come alive in life. I wouldn't be positioned with some of those fear-based situations in a Spartan race if the greater purpose of the race was to get into an experience or a journey that I really wanted to. So wake yourself up to the kinds of actions that make you come alive. And one of the things that I do all the time, I start every single day with, I have tons of these, they're index cards, and I write out the things that are absolutely critical to growing my business. Could be new conversations, could be actionable steps that I must take. I limit them to 5 or 6 every single day, and those are the action steps that I focus on at the very beginning of the day, because I know that if I can conquer them, just like I conquered that third obstacle in the Spartan race, and there's about 30 of them, by the way, it just gave me the confidence I could do any other obstacle, because that was the worst one that I dreaded, and it was number 3. So get over some of those hurdles at the beginning of the day, to give you and propel you into momentum, because if you don't, you're going to be thinking about that obstacle that you have all day towards the end of the day, and you're going to try to attack it probably when you're more tired, when maybe the day is beating you down a little bit, some things that haven't worked out or materialized the way that you envisioned. Again, and from the viewpoint that business is, not that business should be, and really attacking those critical actionable steps at the very beginning of the day, because if you focus on what others find difficult, if you focus on what others have difficulty doing, and if you focus on what others at the end of the day wouldn't even think of doing, it's amazing the innovation, the transformation, the power, the emotional power, and just beginning to feed off that. And that will allow you and supplement you, if you will, through some of the other obstacles that hit us all unexpectedly. So those are some of my thoughts, Kellan, on your question.
So let's talk about that for a second. First, we have he said 3 things. Go to a place where you have power, and I think, in fact, I insist that my clients do that as a regular part of ritual in their morning. And so I so totally agree with that, and think you should do it not only when you quote need to, but as a preparatory thing every day. I love the index cards, the preparation for the day. These are the things I'm going to do today, no matter what. I call those my non-negotiables. And I have my clients do the same thing. Pick 3. I usually pick 3. So the way I talk about it is pick 3 non-negotiables. Do them first, and the rest of the day is extra credit. Now, you as a former teacher and principal would love that whole thing, because I paint that picture. I think of how you felt getting extra credit at school, right? So pick your 3 non-negotiables, and the rest is extra credit. And that doesn't mean after 3 you sit around all day. But what that means is you can feel like you did what you absolutely had to do, and the rest can be extra credit. So go to a place where you create power. Put yourself in a state of power every day. Number 2, create yourself the things you need to do, non-negotiables, and do them. And number 3, I love the thing, and I totally agree and do the same thing, which is intentionally do things that challenge you. Spartan races, physical things. Often this goes down to physical things because, the truth of the iron, the 100 pounds is the only thing that doesn't lie. You can lie to yourself about how you feel, about your connection to God, about your relationship, about your health, about whatever else you want. 100 pounds is 100 pounds, period. And that's the way it is, and you can't fool that. So this is good. We've come just about to the end, and we have about 1 minute left. So, Glenn, in terms of procrastination, why don't you give me some summary thoughts, and then I'll wrap us up.
One of my mantras, and it's tied into writing and using index cards, because writing is the doing part of thinking. So it's a very kinesthetic activity with our brains. And I recommend that hopefully all of you are taking notes here today so that you can activate your mind subconsciously. But if you define humans and who we are, we're social beings and we need people. The best way of connecting with others that is going to benefit you and benefit others is to be a person of value, and opening up new conversations in the market around value-based conversations. It could be with new strategic partners. It could be with your clients. Definitely, that's got to start with yourself. Remember, we talked about, Kellan and I talked about what conversations are ultimately just a silent Q&A with ourselves. So got to ask ourselves better questions. and that's going to lead to creating better answers and creating momentum for the Q&A session by activating it and realizing in our lives with action and momentum and movement, physical activity, and challenging ourselves from a business perspective to generate new conversations. And that becomes cyclical, and we can really develop ourselves quite quickly in today's market. And I believe that all of us can get quantum leaps in our professionalism and whatever ROI that we're going after in business, Kellan.
So thank you, everybody. I want to just sort of riff for just 1 second on something that Glenn said. Quantum leap. You know, we see people today, prodigies, that have staggering abilities in one area or another, or we see huge breakthroughs that come in some area of science, mathematics, or you know, some piece of work. Those breakthroughs are possible. They're not limited, and we see and are now beginning to understand what creates those. So I want to just emphasize that you should be looking for those kinds of things. Don't be satisfied with tiny incremental movement. Look for, expect, and then do the things that create those quantum jumps in your business, your life, your personal relationship, and how you live and experience your life. Thank you for being with us, everyone, today. Break the Cage Now. It's www.breakthecagenow.com. If you'd like to get a hold of me, if you'd like to get a hold of Glenn, you can do it through me. If you like, I don't see a URL there on the screen for him. But anyway, we're going to have one more of these next Saturday about actionable steps to get rid of fear, uncertainty, and procrastination and get that albatross, a F.U.P, from around your neck. Thanks very much, Glenn. Appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you, Kellan.